The leaders of Russia and India were having a love-in, note the hands, and then a huddle with their Chinese hosts. President Trump has imposed 50% tariffs on India because it continues to purchase Russian oil. President Trump's erratic foreign policy, 1 minute self-assigned global peacemaker, the next aggressive isolationist, has allowed China to present itself by contrast as a stable, predictable partner in a multipolar world.
Okay, come on, that video was amazing. And honestly, in a sign of America's waning global dominance, India will continue buying Russian oil and Trump can't do anything about it. Even though the president made good on his threat to slap Indian imports to the United States with a massive 50% tariff, India remains defiant. After all, they've been a major purchaser of Russian oil since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and Putin just sweetened the deal even more. And more on that, some few details on that later. But first, I actually want you to take a little gander at Putin, sharing a tender moment with India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. Beautiful. A guy who poisons his political opponents to death, exploring the gentle palms of the guy responsible for democratic backsliding and anti-Muslim riots in India. Isn't it interesting that while we all see diplomacy on full display here, all Trump sees is a middle finger? Because that's really what it is. They're broadcasting a big FU to Donnie. In fact, Modi affirmed his relationship with Russia at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO summit in China on Monday. And the handholding was basically an overt gesture of India's solidarity with Russia, which of course is a Western adversary. The Financial Times reports that during a breakaway meeting during the summit, Modi told Putin that even in the most difficult circumstances, India and Russia have walked together, shoulder to shoulder. Our close cooperation is important not just to our two countries, but for global peace, stability, and prosperity. Now, Modi's words of affirmation were rewarded pretty handsomely by Putin, who offered India additional savings on its already discounted crude oil. The price of Russian oil has dropped to a discount of $3 to $4 per barrel for India for cargoes that will load in late September and October. Pretty sweet. Well, for India, of course. And as you can imagine, Trump was not pleased. In fact, he expressed that displeasure the only way he knows how, in one of his signature social media rants. So take a look at this. In a Truth Social post, the president declared that the United States does very little business with India, but they do a tremendous amount of business with us. Now, of course, in reality, India is the 9th largest trade partner to the United States. So what Trump is saying is just not true.
To start with, last year, the United States was India's biggest trading partner with bilateral trade worth $190 billion. But here are the numbers President Trump is upset about. India sells a lot more to America than the other way around. So last year, the US ran a trade deficit with India of almost $46 billion. Proof to President Trump the relationship, in his view, is unfair.
Okay, look, US-based corporations have been offshoring American jobs to exploit cheap labor abroad for literally decades. The obvious and inevitable outcome is that we don't make most items that we need here in America. Sounds like a big factor in this whole trade deficit thing. Now, is that India's fault? Is India being unfair? Or maybe corporate greed running the show in America since 1970s is a bigger factor? Anyway, Trump was already annoyed about the trade deficit, but he really upped the ante over this whole India buying Russian oil thing.
Most Indian goods imported into the US face a 50% tariff. The US imposed a 25% import tax earlier this month because of what the administration sees as an unfair trading relationship between the two. Now it's doubled the rate as punishment for buying oil from Russia. India imports most of its oil, last year almost 40% of its crude from Russia. Well, President Trump is saying India is helping Russia fund the war in Ukraine. Earlier this month, he accused it of not caring how many people in Ukraine are being killed by the Russian war machine.
I just want you to take a moment to think about how oil works on the global stage, basically, right? You have these OPEC countries, right? These are oil producing countries who produce oil, which is purchased on the global market. Now, less supply would translate to higher prices for everybody. So if a massive country with a massive population like China is getting 40% of its oil from Russia, well, if they're banned from doing so because the United States wants to bully them from avoiding purchases from Russia, what do you think that does to oil prices across the globe? Anyway, just something to think about. Now, it's unclear how damaging these tariffs will be for India, but a 50% tariff on Indian imports to the United States could crush small businesses in the United States that rely on Indian-made textiles, precious stones, machinery, and steel. And I should note that pharmaceuticals and electronics from India are exempt from Trump's trade war. And as I referenced earlier, Modi made clear that India will keep buying Russia's oil, and said so during the SCO summit in China.
Dear Prime Minister, dear friend, Russia and India have maintained special relations for decades, friendly, trusting. This is the foundation for the development of our relations in the future.
Your Excellency, our special and privileged strategic partnership is representative of the depth and breadth of the relationship. In the most difficult situations, India and Russia have always joined hands with each other. Our close cooperation is not only for the people of both countries, but also for global peace, stability and prosperity.
Back in Beijing, people are anticipating Wednesday's World War II 80th anniversary commemoration to be characterized as a Chinese and Soviet rather than an Allied victory over Nazi Germany and Japan. The People's Liberation Army is training for the parade, which will feature China's latest military technology, much of it more advanced than the American equivalent. As the US absents itself from global leadership and Europe fails to assert its collective influence, China is marching ahead, attracting other countries with technology and wealth, and a sense that it can rethink the past and redefine the future.
I hate scams, especially the ones that target seniors, and Medicare's chock full of them. Between commission-hungry brokers and thousands of confusing plan options, most seniors aren't on the best plan for them. That's why I partner with Chapter. They're fully independent and they work for you, not the insurance companies. That's really important. They can review all your options in under 20 minutes, and the average senior they help saves over $1,100 a year. And the best part of it is, it doesn't cost you a thing. So if you're turning 65, call the number on the screen to connect with a Chapter advisor today.
Remember when the United States did that kind of stuff? Anyway, look, we should take a little bit of time to just talk about the SCO summit itself, which is hosted by China and aligns countries that feel increasingly ostracized by the United States, either due to sanctions in the case of Russia and Iran, or by Trump's tariffs, which has impacted pretty much every country we do trade with. Initially, the SCO emerged as a counter to US influence, specifically in Central Asia, but later expanded to include several other countries, including India and Pakistan in 2017, Iran in 2023, and Belarus in 2024. In addition to SCO member states, the leaders of around a dozen other countries participated in the summit as dialogue partners or guests. And that includes Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and Cambodia. The size and scope of these anti-US alliances seem to be growing as well. So SCO members now represent a whopping 43% of the world's population and 23% of the globe's gross domestic product. So this is really shaping up to be a serious competitive challenge to the West. So much so that economist and public policy analyst Jeffrey Sachs argues that American global dominance really isn't what it used to be now that we're living in a multipolar world.
I don't know what's falling faster, Trump Macron and Merz's approval ratings or the standing of those countries in the world or the US economy or the role of the dollar. They're all on the way down. This is a failed policy. It makes no sense. There is no strategy. There is no thought. There is a complete failure to recognize that there's a big world out there and the Western world can't just boss it around. Trump, who represents these 335 million people or 4.1% of the world population, thinks that he by himself runs the world. It's all a delusion.
It really is a bit of a delusion. And what Jeffrey Sachs was referring to when he referenced policy is the 50% tariff on Indian imports to the United States. Because what that did is essentially push an ally of the United States, India, away from the US, away from the West, and into the arms of Russia and even China. And look, perhaps President Trump does deserve the Nobel Peace Prize because his policies have led to such resentment toward the US that India has been bonding with its longtime foe China over it. The Associated Press reports that Modi remarked on steady progress in improving relations with China after meeting its top diplomat in August and noted, quote, respect for each other's interests and sensitiveness. So the two pretty much loathe each other. Let's be clear about that. They don't agree on anything, except when it comes to Trump and how neither country trusts the United States. So China wants to expand its sphere of influence and is in fact taking full advantage of Trump's penchant for essentially destroying long-term US alliances. While the White House pulls the trigger on military strikes against supposed Venezuelan drug cartels in an obvious regime change ploy, China is exercising soft power and building economic partnerships. As the US funds Israel's genocide, China bankrolls mutually beneficial infrastructure projects across the globe. But look, don't mistake China flexing its soft power as weakness. They've also been flaunting their growing military might.
New weapons unveiled, like this intercontinental ballistic missile, over 100 aircraft, and more than 10,000 troops. The huge parade in the heart of Beijing marked President Xi Jinping's ambition to transform China from one of the world's biggest arms buyers into a maker of all the weapons it needs for itself, and an increasingly formidable exporter on target to hit $3.2 billion across dozens of countries. The parade, to commemorate 80 years since the end of World War II, following the surrender of Japan, fits Xi Jinping's modernization push.
For China, this is a question of prestige. Over the last 6 years, China has made a lot of inroads in a lot of areas of military technology. And so this parade is an opportunity for China to demonstrate the growing power of its defense industry.
China's defense imports have been steadily dropping, reaching its lowest point in the period of 2020 and 2024. At the same time, Beijing has emerged among the world's top 5 arms sellers.
I mean, look, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? I mean, the world leader who has the physical aesthetic of a lovable Winnie the Pooh has some pretty big bombs, more advanced than the United States. And look, China's growing military might certainly mitigates the impact of US sanctions against countries like Russia and Iran, much to the chagrin of Israel. It's important to remember that China's rising global influence did not happen overnight, and it didn't happen alone. Trump's foibles and unforced errors only accelerated this ongoing trend. And this is not good news for the United States. Rather than flexing soft power, building alliances, finding ways to cooperate on the international stage, both economically and in other ways, you have a president at this moment who thinks he could just constantly use tariffs as a cudgel, either on behalf of US corporations, on behalf of certain goodies that he personally wants. His tariffs policy initially was sold to the American people as something that was going to benefit the American people, but that hasn't really happened. And if anything, it has pushed some of our most important global allies away from the West. So it's not shaping up to be great. And to be honest with you, everything I've heard from Trump ever since the relationship with India kind of started to fall apart is that no, the US is good with India. We're good, we're homies, we're best friends. We'll see. But the fact that India is essentially brushing off the 50% tariffs and continuing to buy Russian oil really does show that US influence has been weakened considerably on the global stage.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.